In this presentation, we will be discussing Merrill's first principles of instruction, which is a task or problem-centered approach to teaching. This is the presentation attached to Module 3, Part 2 of the Understanding and Supporting Adult Learners training. In this section, we will be discussing Merrill's first principles of instruction, which is a learning framework designed to provide learners with a problem to solve or a task to complete as it relates to the content they are learning. We will initially be going through this learning framework to develop deeper understanding, discussing the elements of this learning framework, and talking through how this learning framework can be applied within an individual classroom. Dr. M. David Merrill is a noted educational researcher and teacher at Utah State University. Dr. Merrill initially developed Merrill's first principles of instruction in order to combine the best practices of several learning and instructional design frameworks into one. At the center of his framework is the idea of the authentic task. Dr. Merrill built his learning framework around the notion of the authentic task, wherein learning is centered on a real-world problem or a task that needs completing that can easily be translated into real-world applicability. The authenticity of the task or problem allows students to see how what they are learning is applied to their lives, and assists in making the content taught real and valuable for a learner. For an adult learner in particular, the introduction of an authentic task into a lesson facilitates an increased understanding of how the skills they are learning can be applied, and allows adult learners to make clear connections between the content they are learning and the skills they are acquiring for their personal and professional use. Shown here is Merrill's first principles of instruction framework, where you can clearly see the problem or task resides at the center. As mentioned previously, this is a model centered on the notion of an authentic task that provides learners with real-world applicability and added relevancy to any content area. Surrounding the problem or task are the 4 phases that a learner should go through in order to best understand and apply and demonstrate their knowledge and understanding surrounding the problem or task and the content being taught. These elements include activation, demonstration, application, and integration. We will go through each of these elements in this learning theory in greater detail and discuss the ways in which each of these elements can be applied in a lesson plan example. Initially, we will discuss the problem and/or task at the center of the learning framework. The first element we will be discussing from Merrill's first principles of instruction is the foundational problem or task that is to be used throughout the lesson. Within this learning framework, there's always a dependency on the introduction of a problem that is to be solved or a task that is to be performed by a learner that makes the content they are learning real and authentic. This removes the learning for learning's sake and instead replaces it with the purpose of learning to become an acquisition of a specific and usable skill that can be used to solve a problem or complete a task in the real world. For an adult learner, this means creating a problem or task within your lesson that allows adults to understand clearly how their learning can be useful in their lives. In an example, think back to when you were a child learning math for the first time in school. If your teacher had employed the tenets of Merrill's first principles of instruction, they likely would have presented you with a real-world problem that could be solved by the math you were about to learn. For instance, if you were learning division, your teacher may have asked your class how many pizzas she would need to order for everyone in the class to be able to have a slice. This problem creates a need for math and allows all learners to understand the use and application of what they are about to learn. After an authentic task has been created and identified, the first step in Merrill's first principles of instruction is activation. Activation. Learning is promoted when existing knowledge is activated as a foundation for new knowledge. Within this initial phase, activation, learners are able to access and connect prior knowledge, experiences, and understandings to new content. By recalling relevant prior experiences and knowledge, learners will create important connections to prior understandings. And we know from adult learning theory that adult learners lean heavily on their prior experience to inform new knowledge acquisition. Within this element, teachers are encouraged to create opportunities for learners to develop some kind of organizational chart, framework, or even a simple mind map to think through what they may already know about a topic before the lesson begins. There are opportunities here to allow students to share their personal experiences within a topic in an open conversation with others, or through a discussion post online. This is also a great opportunity to allow learners to build on the prior knowledge by completing initial research or readings around the topic in order to better understand the historical context and key understandings from others. To return to our pizza party and division lesson plan example from before, when applying the activation stage, this is likely where your teacher asked if anyone in the room had ever used division before, or if anyone had ever had to split food between multiple people fairly before, and how they might have done so in the past. Students are able to answer on their own prior experiences aloud, and you may have even worked together as a class to come up with some real-world opportunities where division for food or other things as a concept would come in handy to know. After an authentic task has been established and learners have been able to think through and process their prior understandings, experiences, and knowledge around a topic, the next phase in Merrill's first principles of instruction is demonstration. Phase 2, demonstration. Learning is promoted when new knowledge is demonstrated to the learner. During demonstration, the task is completed, or an example of the problem-solving process is demonstrated to the learner. This assists the learner in having an opportunity to better understand what will be asked of them, as well as to provide ample opportunity to witness task completion and to solicit feedback and information from their instructor as necessary. During the demonstration phase, the learner should see the task performed by the instructor. This instructor-led demonstration should provide step-by-step instructions that all learners can understand and link back to the discussions on prior knowledge and experience from the activation phase. Here, the instructor is able to show all learners not only how to complete the task or thinking through the problem, but they are able to reason aloud why they took this particular action. We will call this the I do section. From there, in order to provide scaffolded instruction where students are gradually able to complete the task independently, the teacher or instructor can complete the task once more and complete a full demonstration again, but alongside the class. This can be completed during class time and with input from the learners themselves. This is a great opportunity to allow learners to try new methods and test their knowledge, as well as learn together from any mistakes or errors that are made. Here, the instructor is present with all learners to provide timely feedback on the task completion and to provide challenging questions and additional considerations as needed. This We Do section will allow learners to work together, to practice the skill, and to solicit feedback in order to better understand the process for completion before attempting the task independently. In our pizza party example, this is where your teacher would have demonstrated the full math equation in order to answer the question. He or she would have likely talked through each step aloud as they were completing it. I know there are 23 people in the class, and if each of them want one piece of pizza, then I know I need to multiply 23 by 1. But what if they each want 2 pieces? From there, the teacher would illustrate how knowing the number of slices assists in being able to divide by the number of slices in a box in order to determine how many boxes are needed to be ordered for the pizza party. This is an example of the I do phase, wherein the teacher is able to demonstrate the whole skill to the class. In the We Do section, the class will work together to solve the problem of a little increased complexity, perhaps adding a second class to the tally, or perhaps now each student wants 3 slices of pizza. The task again is modeled by the teacher, but they solicit answers and steps from the class, which provides opportunities for individual learners and the class as a whole to practice the skill alongside the instructor. After an authentic task has been established, learners' prior knowledge has been activated, and the teacher has hosted demonstrations of the task, the next phase in Merrill's first principles of instruction is application. Phase 3, application. Learning is promoted when new knowledge is applied by the learner. During the application phase, the learners are able to apply their prior knowledge and what they have learned in the demonstration phase to complete a task or to solve a problem introduced. By allowing students to practice the skill they learned from their application of that skill, this step encourages students to have hands-on experience with the content and to understand the real-world authenticity of the content they are learning. Learners are provided with an opportunity to practice, solicit feedback, and to demonstrate their knowledge in this phase of application. As we discussed in the demonstration phase, there was an I do section where the teacher completed all demonstration alone, the We Do section where an additional demonstration was completed alongside the entire class. Now, in the application phase, we have reached the You Do section, wherein students are completing the task alone or in small teams. Within the application phase, learners should be provided with clear and concise expectations. The use of a rubric is great here, as well as clear step-by-step instructions that they can refer to if they need reminders. Feedback should be provided as students begin the self-completion, and support and re-demonstrations are provided as necessary by the instructor. This could be an opportunity to allow students to work in teams in order to lean on one another for feedback and for support. Also, be mindful of introducing tasks that have built-in scaffolding and increase in complexity gradually. To return to the pizza party example, this could be where students are split into teams to plan a pizza party for their classmates. They're asked to make a pizza order for the class and are given various parameters to follow, such as how many students are eating, how many pieces for each student, and what toppings to consider. Student teams are responsible for completing the equation on a poster board to be eventually shared with the class. They work together to complete the math as well and to make conclusions based on their answers together. The teacher is walking around to provide feedback and to offer support where needed. And lastly, after a task was introduced, prior knowledge was activated, demonstrations were hosted, and the students were able to apply their knowledge individually, we arrive at the fourth and final stage of Merrill's first principles of instruction, the integration stage. Integration. Learning is promoted when new knowledge is integrated into the learner's world. Within this last phase of the learning framework, learners are encouraged to integrate their new knowledge and the ways in which they have applied to the real world into their own lives. Within this phase, learners are thinking through and also publicly showcasing how they could use their newly acquired knowledge in the future. In this phase, they're increasing the value and inherent application of the skill by thinking through how it may be used elsewhere or how it has altered or improved their thinking in some way. Here, learners are able to discuss, reflect on, and defend their new learning, which allows for an increased attachment to prior knowledge. In our pizza party example, students are given opportunities to reflect on the pizza party project, as well as the math they used to solve the problem that they were given. Students individually discuss their examples of where division could come in handy in their own lives. They are challenged to support and report their understandings, and they may also provide an opportunity for each group to publicly present their poster board to the class. We have now gone through all of the phases of Merrill's first principles of instruction and discussed the strategies and also examples of implementation for each phase. As we continue to explore Merrill's first principles of instruction, it is important to also highlight the ways in which this learning framework complements what we already know about adult learning theory. Adult learning theory tells us that adult learners prefer learning that is immediately applicable, relevant, and task-oriented. When thinking through the entirety of this training so far, there are easy connections between Merrill's first principles of instruction and the adult learning theory. Within the 5 assumptions of adult learning theory, Merrill's first principles complements each and highlights the ways in which each of these assumptions can be actually used in the classroom setting. Self-concept. Merrill's encourages independent thought and learner autonomy in that learners are able to create applications and demonstrate their own knowledge. Experience. The first step in Merrill's is to connect to prior understandings and experiences. In this way, the learning framework is directly applicable to adult learners in that it facilitates clear connections between new content and adult learners' understandings. Readiness to learn. Merrill's first principles of instruction creates relevance and illustrates clear connections to learners' lives. In this way, adult learners can see the relevancy of their learning and the connection to an authentic task. Means the knowledge that they are learning is task-driven rather than simply theoretical in nature. Orientation to learning. Within Merrill's first principles of instruction, the introduction and focus on a task or a real-world problem allows adult learners to see the immediate applications of their learning and to identify the additional connections to future understandings and skill development. And lastly, within the motivation to learn, Merrill sets up the lesson in a way that is learner-centered and allows adult learners to feel personal attachment and ownership and responsibility for the development and understandings. In summary, in this presentation, we have gone over Merrill's first principles of instruction, which is a learning framework that is centered around the ideas of an authentic task. This problem or task allows adult learners to be able to determine real-world applicability and relevance of their learning. Therefore, they can drastically drive up the motivation and orientation for learning for adult students. We discussed the 4 phases of this learning framework, including activation, demonstration, application, and integration. And we talked through the strategies that we as educators can implement within each phase to increase the learner access and interaction with our content. And lastly, we discussed how this framework overlaps nicely with the 5 assumptions we were previously discussing with adult learning theory. By using a learning framework like Merrill's First Principles of Instruction, we're ensuring that our students are learning content in a way that makes it meaningful, that allows for independence and autonomy, and where students are able to make clear connections to what they already knew and what they want to discover and learn in the future.